Hey, hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Greg Baker. I'm the managing partner with the Alumni Venture Sports Fund. The Sports Fund is part of Alumni Ventures, a network-powered venture firm helping accredited individuals become more successful venture investors. We're pleased that you were able to join us. Sorry that this is coming as a recording, but we had a little technical difficulty. We're speaking today about our fund, but more about team ownership, the associated landscape in sports. This presentation is for informational purposes only and is not an offer to buy or sell securities, which are only made pursuant to the formal offering documents for the fund. Please review important disclosures in the materials provided for the webinar, which you can access at www.av.funds-funds.com/disclosures. All right, more legal stuff. Thanks. Quick overview of Alumni Ventures. We are a large venture capital fund for individual investors. We're one of the most active venture capital funds in the country over the past several years, and recently have been ranked as one of the top performing venture capital funds by CB Insights. We have over 1.25 billion invested in us in capital over the past several years, and over 1,300 portfolio companies. We have recently launched our sports fund, which is going to invest in a variety of areas in and around the sports world: sports media, fan engagement, esports and gaming, potentially teams and leagues, and performance equipment. $25,000 minimum investment, access to our syndication program, and it takes us about a little over a year to put together that portfolio of about 15 to 20 companies. Joined today by Bill Kraus. Bill, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure. Greetings. Thanks for having me. Bill Kraus. I am based in the Phoenix, Arizona market. I've been an investor in the Phoenix Rising Football Club since 2016. I'm a minority investor. I'm a board member, and over the last 2 years, I became the club's board chairman or board governor, and represent the club at league board of governors meetings, etc.
Right. And Ted?
Hey, I'm Ted Moskowitz, coming at you from Austin, Texas, former securities lawyer turned entrepreneur turned investor. I've been running an early stage venture fund for the last 6 or 7 years with one of my best friends, and recently came on to own and operate the Texas Rangers Major League Pickleball team.
All right, Keaton.
Yeah, brief introduction. I work on the sports fund team here with Greg. By way of background, my exposure to this field, I started my career in professional basketball, so I played briefly in Europe, was a member, I guess the product of one of these teams that maybe we'll be talking about today. So excited to look at it from several angles.
All right, and I'm Greg Baker. I'm managing partner of the fund. In my personal life, I have very, very small ownership in 2 minor league baseball teams and a professional golf event. So I have a little bit of exposure to this space, but we'll talk a little bit more with the experts, Bill, Ted. So why don't you describe a little bit about why you got into wanting to own a franchise? It's always a fan's dream, but is it does that match with reality?
Go ahead, Ted.
Sure. So I'm probably the last person who you would ever expect to own a pro sports team, because I'm not a traditional sports guy. You know, some people grow up with this dream of wanting to own a team, and that was certainly not me. I've always played a lot of sports, but was never someone that was into the professional side of the game. And I think a lot of it was just, coming from this sort of distaste of having my emotions tied up in the fates of these pro athletes with no connection to a city, who I saw as essentially just mercenaries, right? And their fate on a Sunday impacting my, own emotions was something that I just did not really align with. But, we had a unique opportunity here with the Ranchers to do what I've really been doing throughout the entirety of my career, which is redefining traditional industries and redefining these sort of hierarchical institutions of power. And, asking this question of like, starting from scratch, if you were to build out a pro sports ownership group, what would that look like? So, right before the Ranchers, I've been running an early stage venture fund and doing a lot of work in the Web3 space. And a lot of what we talk about in Web3 is how do we properly align incentives, right? How do we make sure that people who are bringing value to a network are the ones who are receiving value in return? And, I just sort of had this idea that, the fans are the ones who bring value to pro sports teams. The athletes are the one who bring value to the teams, but they don't really get any of the benefit from it. And so we set out to do something a little bit different. And so the idea with the Ranchers is to eventually move toward a true fan-owned model where people who are in our community are the ones who actually own the team. And so, we started by first sort of building out what we saw as the ideal ownership group, right? Rather than one wealthy family owning the whole thing. We have over 50 owners right now, and it's really an experiment in what it looks like for a community to try and build something together. And that means compiling, famous Grammy award-winning music artists, #1 in the world athletes in their respective sports, GPs from venture funds, family offices, but also, vendors and people who provide their suite of services and things like that. And so we're really proud of the group that we brought together and are trying to democratize pro sports ownership in a way that hasn't really been done before.
Great. Bill?
Sure. My entree was not planned either. I mean, I was a big sports fan and still am. Early on figured out I'm never going to be a pro athlete. And so, of course, you fantasize, oh, what if I was a coach or a GM or an owner, right? Like, that would be really cool. But it just wasn't really a reality set. That didn't have that kind of balance sheet. And, you see NFL and NBA teams trading for billions of dollars and, decades ago, primarily owned by one family, maybe two. It just wasn't a reality set. But the opportunity came my way. There's a guy trying to put a group together to acquire what was then called the Arizona United Soccer Club, and almost like a community investment where he's bringing a lot of leaders from the community into this ownership group. And I looked at it a few times and thought about it a lot, and then I finally jumped in. And so, yeah, it was like I said, it wasn't a scripted, like thoughtful, like, oh, this is my goal. It just kind of came about, and I jumped in, and now I'm in deep, a lot deeper.
Yes, I had the honor of sitting in the owner's box with Bill at a game, and I think your wife would prefer you sitting somewhere else. But
Yeah, you're right.
Leads me to my next question. What have you enjoyed more about the ownership process, and what kind of surprised you, or is kind of something you're not crazy about?
I'll go first. We have a great ownership group. Like, I've really become great friends with this group. It's a great family experience. Like, there's not many investments opportunities out there where you can go to the match with your family on Saturday night, and it's sort of an event. And so, a lot of aspects of this have been, really positive. And we won the league championship last year, which was, an exciting thrill, right? We thought we were close a few prior years, but we didn't quite get there. And then last year we delivered it. On the surprising side, there's a lot. I didn't realize, I was always a sports fan, but I didn't realize how much I would agonize over every match result on Saturday night, or that you could be in a business where you're judged, like your success as a business owner or as a coach or a player are judged every Saturday night over a 90-minute match. You're either fantastic and we're great, or you're a complete buffoon. And in this, current day and age of social media and Twitter, people air it out after every match. Fire the manager. This player's terrible. The owner's terrible. There's a lot out there. It's which I didn't really think through at the time. That kind of comes at you. That is surprising.
All right. Ted, what's your experience been?
I'm surprised just how much fun it is, right? Like, it's the most fun thing that I've ever done. And I've done a lot of things that, I've really enjoyed. And just, like the joy of having a team to root for and going and watching them play in person is amazing. It makes me understand sort of what I guess I was missing all these years, like not following pro teams. So that's been amazing. And, similar to Bill, like the the people who are involved, right? You know, we have this amazing ownership group of people who are all trying to do something different and do something special, and seeing everyone lean in and contribute has been a really special experience. On the negative side, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that we deal with is, you know, pickleball is really having this moment in culture, right? It's very much in the zeitgeist, like everyone's playing and picking it up. And yet, despite the number of people who are playing and the sort of like zealotry that they have toward it, there's very little awareness of the pro game. You know, there was a study done somewhat recently that showed that only 3% of pickleball players could name the #1 player in the world. Like, imagine if only 3% of basketball players had ever heard of LeBron James and can name him, right? And so on one hand, it's, you know, it's a big hill to climb of like bringing that kind of awareness of the pro game from people who just go out and play, you know, in their local park or country club or things like that. But it's also an amazing opportunity to help shape the future of the sport and the way that people engage with it. So, you know, there's both a challenge and an opportunity there.
Well, jumping out of order, there was a question submitted of how do you approach the changing the perception that it's a game for retirees?
Yeah, you know, I jokingly said earlier, like, I think Sports Center top 10 plays of the week are doing a pretty good job of that for us, right? You know, people are getting exposure to pickleball in that way and seeing, you know, the amazing points that are played out. And, you know, it's a young person's game, right? You know, my hopes of going pro would have to be, you know, as a masters athlete when I turn 50, you know, a few years down the road. I'm never going to be able to make it right now. But I think, you know, we're seeing the pro game become younger and younger. You know, another thing that's shifting a lot is the current generation of pros. The vast majority of them are former tennis players, pro tennis players, or, you know, D1 college tennis players. What we're seeing now for the first time is, you know, a cohort of people who grew up playing pickleball. You know, people who have never played tennis before, or racquetball, or squash, or badminton, or other paddle sports. You know, coming up and being like sort of the pure pickleball players. That's going to start to shift things as well. And also just seeing, you know, university teams and at the NCAA level and at the Olympic level, you know, pickleball start to happen, I think, over the next decade or so. We'll see that shift more and more. So it's beautiful that it's for everyone, right? Like the retirees and boomer generation absolutely can play. And that's what's so appealing about it, is you can go on the court and be, you know, having a fun time pretty quickly. But we'll see more and more, you know, it being dominated as a young person's game.
Yeah,
We have Greg, I was going to just piggyback that. We have a similar phenomena somewhat in Phoenix. I mean, we're playing the largest global sport with the largest fan base on the planet, right?
Yeah.
But you can go around Phoenix and say, have you ever been to a Phoenix Rising match? And people are like, you know, who's that? I mean, the soccer community knows we're here. And there's certain fans out there that say, oh, you know, I'll engage and, you know, become a season ticket holder if there's ever an MLS team in Phoenix and not a second division USL team. But it's, you know, achieving awareness is a challenge with some folks. And it doesn't help that we've moved the location of our venue once or twice, right? People are like, oh, you used to play over there, but I don't see you anymore. But it's an interesting challenge. And then in our market, one of the things we deal with is it's a competitive market. Like we have every pro sports team here, the 4 major men's sports. We have a WNBA team. We have well, we just lost the Coyotes.
we lost the hockey team.
We just lost one. Yeah, we lost one.
Temporarily.
And, yeah, and we have ASU football we go up against on Saturday nights in the fall. Like it's a competitive landscape, and I don't have hard data, but I see there's some newer like Major League Soccer teams that have come to Austin, you know, where Ted is, or St. Louis or Charlotte, where, yeah, they're big markets and there's competition, but maybe not as big as Phoenix. And those markets, it's really taken off. Like they have really strong fan bases, and you see, you know, images from their home matches, and, you know, the supporters are really engaged and on fire. So yeah, competitive marketplace is another something that, you know, it was kind of a surprise to me. I hadn't really thought all that through.
Yeah, I wonder, the people that you talk to that say that they'll buy tickets when they're MLS. I had season tickets to the MLS franchise in Chicago for several years, and everybody, when we talk about it, they're like, well, why do you go to that? Why don't you just watch EPL in the morning and they have the rest of your day?
Right.
We had a lot of reasons why we enjoyed being season ticket holders and loved it, but you know, it being the most popular sport in the world, it is kind of strange the level of what people will watch and not watch. And having seen your team play, the difference level is not, it's more like the difference between an ACC basketball game and a Horizon League basketball game. And the Horizon League can occasionally beat the ACC team.
Right.
As we
I
see.
think the same phenomenon happens. I mean, every year in the US Open Cup, a USL team picks off an MLS team. It just happens.
Well, it'll be easier this year since a bunch of them didn't play.
That's true. Yeah.
A quick story on that, Bill. I'm looking kind of in retrospect at my career, but as luck would have it, when I first arrived, my first stop was in Germany as a player. And I showed up to a team that had varied success in their history. But it was, talk about competitive market. It was in Germany, so obviously soccer is king. Handball actually second sport across the country. We didn't have either team at the high level, but we did have a basketball team, and so our team was the biggest thing going in the city. I was in a city that you've never heard of in Germany called Ulm. We played against Frankfurt, Munich, Berlin, all great teams, all great franchises. But our fans showed up to every single thing we did. They showed up to every extra thing we did. And actually, as I look back on it, the club that I played for has been one of the fastest growing and kind of, I wouldn't say, there's been a lot of successful teams in Germany, but the delta between where it started and where it is now has probably been the biggest because that fan base is just so into it. So like competitive regional marketplace is a really big factor.
And we have an avid, fan base supporter group. Our playoff run last year was all on the road. And they followed us 4 weekends in a row, final all the way across the country in Charleston with like 5 or 6 days notice. And I think our fans bought 200 tickets there. So that was a pretty good showing, but there are more fans here. So like as a data point, Cardinal Stadium will sell out if Mexico is playing Guatemala in a Gold Cup match or something like that. Like it is 60,000 fans and it is packed. But, we'd love to have 10,000 in our matches, and we have had 10,000, but not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. My little exposure to this, the minor league baseball team I'm a part owner in, it's in a small town in the Midwest, and you go to a game and the town built a beautiful facility, much nicer than this team deserves, but the town turns out for it. And seeing the the 5, 6, 7-year-olds just, in awe of, hey, these are real baseball players. And
right.
It's a lot of fun to watch that and help bring that to a community. So let's talk a little bit about where you see your sport going over the next few years and possibly, and, a little bit about how ownership might be changing. I mean, we don't want to take anything away from any of us on this call, but growing up, none of us, we're not at the level that any of the owners we knew when we were growing up were. Well, Ted might be, but I'm.
Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 parts to that, right? Like, where do we think the sport is going, and then where do we think ownership is going? With respect to our sport, we sort of hinted this earlier, but pickleball is already really big, right? And it's big business, and everything from like the courts and facilities to paddle tech and things like that, is already pretty big. What we're going to see is the professional game catch up with that, right? We've seen something similar in golf, right? Like you have first the sort of casual, Sunday only watchers, or the people who play themselves and want to watch a little bit. But then as people get better themselves and watch more, you have more affinity with individual players. You start to watch earlier and earlier rounds. We're going to see the same thing, like we might have 500,000 people watching, a finals or something on ESPN. What I want to see is 500,000 people watching like the sort of first rounds on like a Thursday, right? And not just the later stuff. So I think that's part of where pickleball is going, is just the catching up the professional game to like the fervor that we have in the amateur game right now. And then in terms of ownership, we have a very clear path for where we want to go. We want to move towards more of a fan-owned model and a more diverse ownership group. I think we really want to create a good model for the next generation of athletes. Like, I think so many kids grow up wanting to be sports stars. I want them growing up wanting to be owners, right? And I think that begins with having owners who look like them, whether that be, you know, women or immigrants or African Americans, whatever it is. Like, we want to inspire that next generation of people to want to own the team, not just play on the team. So that's a big part of it. And then just giving more and more opportunities for people in our community to invest and to be the beneficiaries of the actual economics of it. You know, like, when you own something, you treat it differently, right, than when you don't. You know, friends of mine who own restaurants and stuff around town, like, that's where you bring all your people, right? You have friends in town, like, you want to go to your place, even if you're a very, very small minority holder. I still find that to be true. And so that's what we want, is inspire people here locally in Austin and across Texas and then across the country, to buy into the idea and the values of what it means to be a rancher. And with that, you know, sell more tickets, sell more merch. You know, there's an economic benefit that comes with that. But we want part of it to flow down to, you know, the people who are bringing value to the team.
Bill?
Yeah, soccer is an interesting thing globally. You know, in Europe, a lot of super wealthy Americans now own clubs over there. Sovereign wealth funds from the Middle East own clubs. Private equity firms are investors. Here in the US, when we first got involved in 2016, 2017, MLS announced a continued expansion plan with $150 million expansion fee price tag. That the latest franchise sold to San Diego last year was $500 million. And that was before Messi came to the country and started creating awareness. So I don't know where it goes. But you combine, you know, $500-600 million franchise fee with, you know, building a new stadium for $500 million or more, like, you'd be $1 billion just to be in, just to join the party, and you're probably not cash flow positive anytime soon. So it's a daunting investment that really, you know, in soccer at the MLS level, it's the super wealthy, it's the multi-billionaires, it's the elite that can afford to own clubs there. In the USL at the second level, it's an opportunity for I don't know, lesser affluent people to gain access. You know, we're in the championship division, which is, you know, sanctioned Division II by US Soccer. There's 24, 25 franchises. But there's also a level down. The USL is still expanding. They call it League One, which is sanctioned Division III. And, you know, every month it seems like they're announcing a new franchise being sold and pending, you know, like in Buffalo and Spokane and, you know, cities all around, Santa Barbara. So there's more access, I think, to ownership at that level.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that in the US, MLS can't adopt relegation. Where you get the stories like Europe, where the small town becomes a major league franchise.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, there's some great stories over there. Obviously, Wrexham is playing out in front of everyone on Netflix with Ryan Reynolds. Good on them. But yeah, it would be fantastic to have here. And it was debated heavily at the USL Board of Governors meetings. Like, do we just start it within our own ranks? You know, I can understand why the last few entrants into the Major League Soccer who paid $500 million don't want to sign up for it, because that would be a quick deterioration in value. And I've seen, you know, clubs in the Premier League that are sort of at the bottom of the table that might be in market trying to sell. And, you know, it's a big risk. Like, if you get relegated right after you've made an investment or acquired a club over there, you're taking a big hit in terms of your media rights revenue. But we couldn't even get it sorted yet just within the USL because, you know, people paid different franchise fees to come into the championship level and have built different kinds of stadiums. And they're like, well, what's in it for me to kind of, you know, be relegated down to the next level and be playing at, you know, different quality of venues and all that kind of stuff. So it's complex, but for competition and for the fans, it would be great. It would be great.
Yeah, it might help if the Super Football College League that they're debating comes about, where there is a relegation zone proposed in that. It might make it more palatable to the U.S. sports fan.
Sure.
It's certainly not going to be palatable to the owner who paid the $500 million for the franchise fee. But, you know, at some point, I think it just makes it better for everyone. There's more.
there's a couple other things that are infiltrating sports here that are being borrowed from soccer or football and the rest of the world, like the whole idea of a cup tournament in the middle of the season, like the NBA Cup, right? You could see the NHL adopting something like that, right? It's a cool phenomena in the rest of the world in soccer, and we have it here. It's not as popular. Like the U.S. Open Cup doesn't draw as much attention as like the FA Cup in England, but it's the same kind of format.
Yeah, I remember being in LA several years ago and noticing that Galaxy was playing, I guess, Chivas at the time in a US Open Cup game, and they played it in a backwater stadium behind everything else, and there were about 400 people there. And it was the same game that you'd have seen on Saturday in an MLS game, but I got to go. It was a really inexpensive ticket.
Sure. Well, some of the teams in our league have made good money out of it. You win a match and you get the draw, and all of a sudden, making this up, but Colorado or Real Salt Lake are playing at New Mexico. Or I mean, we'd love to. Our dream would be to win a match and then have the draw come out, and we're hosting LAFC. Like, that would be fantastic for a club at our level, which is the phenomenon in Europe too. It's great when you see Liverpool off playing, I don't know, in Ipswich Town or something.
Well, you'd want to draw Miami FC, I think.
Well, that would be good tw Yeah. I think it starts more regional though. That's probably less likely.
Ted, for those that are a little less familiar with professional pickleball, what's the format of your season? Where can people catch it other than Top Sports Center Top 10?
So the format of the season was a little bit different this year than it will be next year because of the merger that we had with what's now sort of our sister league. We had a little bit late start, so it's starting May 8th is the beginning of the season in Atlanta, and goes through the sort of like semifinals and finals will be in Dallas in November. There's a number of different places that people can watch. I would say sort of like the prime time matches are on ESPN and other major channels. But we also have Pickleball TV, which was a recent joint venture between our league and the tennis channel, where you can watch all the other content. So the earlier rounds are on Pickleball TV, but if you go to majorleaguepickleball.com or rangers.com, you can see the schedule and see sort of what the upcoming matches are. In terms of the format of the league, so there's 24 teams split into a Premier League and a Challenger League, sort of like, the top and then lesser league. And, it was interesting hearing Bill talk about the sort of promotion relegation system, because originally that was the plan for what we were going to have would be the top 12 teams in Challenger and the top 12 teams in Premier, and bottom 12 teams in Challenger, and teams would go up and down. But it's actually been changed to where what we're doing now is there's a plan to promote only, but not relegate the best teams from Challenger up to Premier. And the reason we did that was interesting. It's really because there isn't enough depth of talent at the professional level to have the sort of highest ranked and 24th ranked team have a good level of play between them. The difference between the top players and the sort of 100th ranked players, is pretty significant at this point. So as that pool of talent develops and we have more and more kind of top level players, we'll be promoting teams up into the higher league, and that'll happen for a few years until either all the teams are moved up or we eventually just collapse it. But that's sort of an interesting tidbit about how that gets played right now. And this is the first year that we've actually had sort of multi-year contracts and had a real draft where you're choosing players for the long term. Previously, you had like new players coming into each team each season. But now with this season, we have multi-year deals with the players. So you'll be able to more closely associate like your favorite fans and teams and kind of develop love for the franchises.
Great. I'm going to jump into some of the questions that were submitted by the group. First one is, while the big money are clearly invested in team and coach staff salaries, what do you see as the biggest improvement opportunities on the business operation sides of teams and franchises?
I mean, for us, it's a greenfield opportunity, right? Like, the players themselves already have great coaching and they're playing and practicing together a lot. And so it's probably more the reverse for us. The business side is where the majority of the opportunity lies. I mean, we're doing a lot for the players, don't get me wrong. Like, we have a phenomenal GM coach for the team, and we have sports psychology and athletic trainers who work with a lot of pro athletes and Olympians and things like that working with the team. But really, merch, sponsorships, events, ticket sales are a huge opportunity for us. And one of the things that's really interesting is that, the way player contracts work in our league is some of the players have like a lot more days in their contract that they're committed for than the number of playing days. And we have some discretion as a team for how we're going to use that. So, some of it we'll use for just sort of like doing things in our local community, teaching after school programs for underserved schools and volunteering at the food bank and like cool community stuff like that. But a lot of it we'll use for, teaching clinics or corporate events and things, we're owners in facilities and things too. And so that's certainly a big part of it as well. And so I think, yeah, the majority of the opportunity is actually on the business side for us rather than the on-court performance.
Yeah. For us, I think we learned over the years, winning sells tickets. And so we've made, we've had specific discussions, like if you had $200,000, would you spend it on marketing or would you put it into your roster? We kind of lean toward roster. We've found that, being competitive on the field certainly helps. And there's been a couple of years where we've underperformed, and it was a struggle. It was a struggle to generate enthusiasm and sell tickets. But beyond that, look, the traditional, business or revenue levers for us are the ones right? Tickets, sponsorships, concessions, merchandise, parking. And at the higher levels, you have media rights. That doesn't really exist as much at the lower levels. But what's really evolving is there's other revenue streams you really have to attack. Like unique to soccer, there's this player transfer market. So we can develop a player and sell a player on. Now, do we like selling off our best player? Not really, because it doesn't help us competitively, but it's the right thing for them. And so we've actively sold, I don't know, a handful of players over the last few years, and that's generated, some incremental cash flow. But running non-soccer events at our venue, having camps, youth club, clinics, that's all a revenue opportunity. We've talked about, do we launch a women's pro team? I mean, we already have the facility. It's not like we're going to pay any extra rent on our stadium, right? There'll be some variable costs to open it up, but running more events through our venue is smart. Sports betting's become legal in Arizona. That's an opportunity. Just fan engagement through other platforms, through technology and daily fantasy or whatever. Like, there's so many other ancillary things that we need to harness to really make the business model work longer term. And I guess the last thing on that is, for big clubs making big investments in stadiums, the real estate development opportunity around it these days is just as important as the stadium itself. Like, because it's hard to imagine that the stadium pencils, right? If you're putting $500 million or $1 billion into a stadium, unless there's other stuff around it.
And yeah, a lot of different avenues. You guys, either of you having issues with individual prop betting and people getting a sore eyeball or something to come out of a match, or like the NBA?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And your translators are all legit?
Exactly.
Yeah, we just saw betting enabled for pickleball for the first time over the past year. So far it's been for the more like individual and team formats than it has been in ours. In MLP, given that like the format is there's 2 men and 2 women on each team, you play at least 4 matches, men's doubles, women's doubles, mixed and mixed. It would be really hard, I think, to set a line, for that, because you have all these different combinations for kind of what goes into it, which I guess is a good thing. But overall, these people want to win, like they really want to win more than anything else. I don't think there's a huge risk there for people like taking a dive or throwing a match or something like that. I mean, you ruin your whole career, right, in one moment. And now that people are being paid well to play the sport that they love, I think that removes a lot of the incentive for that. So I don't personally have a problem with it. But I definitely am aware of like the risks that come with that for sure.
You think it's tough to set a line? I don't think you've been betting in England very often. They set a line on anything.
I haven't been betting anywhere very often, so I guess so.
Next question, I guess, is for me: opportunities to invest in sports franchises through Alumni Ventures. As I've mentioned at the top, our fund is looking at opportunities within franchises and leagues. It's a little tougher for us because our model is to invest alongside venture capital fund has to be leading the round, and there are fewer opportunities that way. We also can't invest in an LLC, which is to protect our investors from having phantom income. So we are definitely looking at it. There are opportunities we've seen. We're considering a few, but and we hope to, but nothing really.
I think the other thing I'll add to that is I typically use the language emerging leagues and teams, and I think there's different vectors to think about emerging. For soccer, for instance, is it a new geography? Is it a new demographic? Women's soccer in Phoenix is emerging versus men's soccer in England. The same for an emerging sport, pickleball. We've talked to cycling. We've talked to razor scooters. There's different vectors on which to measure emerging. And, part of the analysis, again, we follow smart leads for a reason, but part of the analysis is like, we're looking for that alpha. And, if we went and invested in the New York Yankees, how much is that franchise going to grow? Even though the Phoenix Rising might be a smaller franchise, there might be a bigger return profile depending on kind of the nature of the business. So I think we put some parameters on the word emerging, but it's a consideration of what's the change in value potential here. And there's a lot of ways to think about that for us.
And not to be absolutely blunt about things that we've looked at, the next two questions are related to women's sports because of the recent bump in interest, certainly in college basketball. What effect on sports team ownership return opportunity do you see from recent increase in women's sports? And also, how can non-institutional investors invest in team sports? Is there a push in the industry to invest more in the WNBA? So, let's talk about women a little bit. Ted, you invest, your team has women.
Yeah, I mean, we have, something I think really special and unique, in Major League Pickleball, which is from the outset, the founder of the league said guaranteed equal pay for men and women, right? So the prize money, is split evenly between the men and the women. And that's something that, we think is really important. It's a reason that pickleball, I think, has a really good chance of becoming an NCAA sport, pretty soon, as you don't have the sort of Title IX concerns, right, that you might have otherwise. Like, you sort of have the equity built into the nature of the sport that we play. And then, our ownership group, it's something that's really important for us as well, to have, a high number of female owners as well. So, we're thinking about it, I think, through a lot of different lenses. What was the second half of the question?
More about the WNBA.
Pass on that.
Bill, you'd mentioned that you were looking at a women's team to add to.
So it's an emerging landscape. There's a kind of a professional women's league that's been around for a number of years called the NWSL. You have high profile national team players like Alex Morgan playing in San Diego and others, around the country. But our league, the USL, just announced in the last year or so, they're launching a women's pro league. In fact, they went to US Soccer and received Division I sanctioning. It launches this year in August. It's called the USL Super League. And so you're going to have two Division I leagues competing in the same country, which has happened here before, right? NBA, ABA, NFL, AFL, I guess, the USFL is out there now. It's hard to say where the landscape is going to go. One thing that the USL is doing to differentiate is to play more on the international calendar, meaning, here in this country for pro soccer, we kind of mirror the baseball schedule. We start in the spring, we finish in the fall. But for the rest of the world, they start in August. Most of the rest of the world, they start in August, they play through the winter and through the Christmas holidays, and they finish in May. And so, by the way, with the Phoenix climate, we would love that, right? Our best weather is in December, January, February for attending a match outdoors, but not so much for, the clubs in our league, in Chicago and Hartford and wherever. But the women's league is launching on that international calendar, and that's a point of differentiation. I'm curious to see how that will play out, but we're keeping a close eye on it. We have a big enough market and enough soccer fans that at the right time, there'll be a women's pro team here.
Yeah. I can attest to Chicago having bad weather, but it's not Minneapolis. Let's see. how can angel investors participate in sports ownership? What are typical investment sizes, and how do you characterize risks?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, like this is part of the mission, right? Is democratizing ownership. There's actually a syndicate live right now on AngelList for investing in the holding company that's an owner in the Texas Ranchers. You know, in terms of check sizes, it's been pretty varied, right? Depending on the person and the strategic value that they bring in. I mean, it's anywhere from, you know, 25K up to $1 million, right? You know, some of the like pro athletes sort of want to like dip their toe in and just be involved. And so we accommodated smaller checks, and then, you know, some of them are definitely larger. So I think for us, it's been just kind of like front and center, like, hey, we want a lot of people involved. If you have some kind of strategic value, then, you know, give us a shout. And we're pretty open about that. So it's a little bit easier. We have longer term plans for doing like an actual Reg CF, you know, equity crowd fund, which would be like very small checks potentially, and people can stay tuned for that, you know, over the next few months, I think, with a long-term goal of, you know, doing something like tokenizing the equity and having it just trade, you know, for market price. I think over the long term is part of what we'd like to see, and that, you know, would be accessible internationally, you know, beyond just US people. So I think, you know, we're a really interesting experiment and case study in what this looks like, and we'll see how it plays out. But you know, so far so good. Like, we're the most followed team in the league. I believe we have the most revenue of the team in the league. You know, we're really held out as an example of what it looks like to do a good job of building a pickleball franchise. And, you know, we credit that to the community that owns the team right now and the way that we're expanding it.
I think there's a value to being a lesser known or newer sport where you have more latitude in like team and franchise formation versus kind of a established way to build a soccer club, soccer program. And when we see kind of a variety of business models as in sports that we've never considered before or just have been less considered, there's less of an inertia there. So I think it's exciting to think about almost what you guys could build and maybe flow through to the more established leagues as well someday.
I think in the USL, every team is raising money. You know, I think if an angel investor had interest, they should just contact a club in the market, or go through the league office. You know, if they're sort of geographically agnostic. But yeah, I'd say it's available. A couple of teams have even done crowdfunding last year. I know there's 2 teams in California that did it. We've looked at it. We haven't done it yet. I think some of the average check size there was, you know, a few $100s, maybe $500. But the good thing is you get ambassadors. Now you have a couple hundred or 1,000 or 2,000 people that you're an owner, right? And maybe you have a little pre-party before the match under a tent where you know, you can have a beer and a pretzel, but you're an owner, and now you're engaged and you're buying merch and you're attending the matches and you're out in the community talking about it. So there's more than just the capital raise aspect to it. It's kind of building connectivity to the fan base. So we've looked at it, haven't done it yet, but there's opportunities available for angel investors for sure in the USL.
Obviously, the movement and focus in women's sports right now is significant. Can you talk about how this has changed investment landscape, the difference between investing in early stage sports like teams and leagues versus more established entities? And Keaton, you probably should start there.
Yeah, we covered a little bit in the last question. I think pros and cons to different things. You know, our job, you know, from our seat is kind of trying to weigh the risks versus the potential outcomes, and it's not clean math, right? Like it's not there's no perfect calculus on it. But yeah, I think it's about looking around, trying to consider what the ancillary kind of opportunities are. I mean, when Bill talks about kind of real estate implications, right? This is a new form of analysis that we aren't used to doing. So again, follow smart people. But yeah, I think there's challenges to understanding these things and understanding where they're heading.
All right. Let's see there. Where do you see sponsorships and corporate partnerships from sports teams developing in the new age of media marketing, AI, and ticketing?
We've had a pretty consistent, you know, sponsor base here in Phoenix. you know, the things like Carvana's on the center of our jersey. You know, we've got financial institutions and car dealers and healthcare companies. You know, the kind of traditional sponsorship sort of companies you'd see. Circle K is a sponsor. I'm not trying to rattle them all off, but just kind of give a flavor for it. But I think as things evolve and you know, we're more relevant on TV or with some of the technology and the apps that people are using, if we're engaging fans that way, I think it does open up some different things. Cannabis is a new category. We haven't done it yet, but cannabis is legal in Arizona, and you know, it's not for everybody, and I'm sure some moms would wish, you know, it wasn't. So you kind of have to be thoughtful about what you do, but yeah, there's more and more opportunities, and we're actively scouring the universe to kind of grow our sponsor base.
Something interesting that, you know, we've been talking about and working on is the different types of sponsors that we want to bring in compared to traditional sports. So, you know, I think most sports sponsorship is thought of as like, you put your name on the jersey and you're seen on TV and like, that's it. You know, we've been thinking about what are other ways to activate in our community, right? Whether it be sponsorship of local courts or sponsoring a clinic, or like digital only sponsorships where people have a watermark on our social media posts, doing community activations. And, you know, there are brands that don't care about the TV exposure. They just want their product in people's hands. And so, you know, we're doing events where they're getting to physically, you know, promote their product and hand it out to people and get a lot of people sampling and trying. So I think there's definitely a benefit to being creative about like looking for different types of businesses and not only thinking about the ones that care about the name on the chest, but care about other things as well. And coming up with creative packages for them that, you know, help to align with their needs that are a little bit different.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I've kept you long because of our technical difficulties, so I think we'll wrap it up here. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and always exciting to talk to people who are doing some interesting things a little deeper in sports than just turning on the TV or, you know, picking up a pickleball racket.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.